Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Sunday, June 18th, 2023, and we are live. So we know it's Juneteenth a weekend. We know there are numerous Juneteenth celebrations taking place in your city, taking place across the country, and probably more so than ever before. But I think it's really important for us to dispel some myths surrounding Juneteenth and understand how to use Juneteenth as a powerful weapon to educate African Americans on history, economics, law, and politics. Also, to give America a massive history lesson because Americans are very ignorant of history, and also to fight for reparations, dealing with the repairing of the damage of a legacy of 246 years of slavery, decades of Jim Crow segregation, housing discrimination, voter suppression, redlining, closing the racial wealth gap, etc. So we can utilize Juneteenth for a powerful tool, but we cannot allow Juneteenth to be co-opted by other people, and we can't allow it just to be reduced down to a black version of the 4th of July, where we just have cookouts and barbecues and eat hot dogs and things of this nature, drink beer and have a party. Okay, so hope everybody's doing well. Click like or give us a thumbs up on this broadcast. Follow us on our fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. I'll also give you some information about class number 1 of our online class starting up today. After I finish this broadcast, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we have the information in the thread of this broadcast, so you can register for that 12-week online course. Okay, so if we're going to look at some Juneteenth history quickly here, okay, and then I'm going to cite some articles that just came out recently, and in the past couple of years that dispel myths. So blackpast.org has a good article, blackpast.org, Juneteenth, the growth of an African American holiday. And if we look at this briefly here, I want to focus in on this part right here. It talks about how Texas was far removed from battles during the Civil War, and Texas became a safe haven for slave owners. Okay, Texas, however, was another matter, isolated from both Union and Confederate forces during the Civil War, and thus spared horrific battles on its soil. Texas became Texas has become a place of refuge for slaveholders. Texas has become a place of refuge for slaveholders seeking to ensure that their property would not hear of freedom. Through April, May, and part of June 1865, they did not, largely speaking. Now, we're going to correct some history of this narrative, but we could say largely speaking. Finally, on June 19th, 1865, freedom officially arrived in Texas. One day before, on June 18th, 1865, Union General, Major General Gordon Granger, and 2,000 federal troops, mostly African American men, landed on the beach at Galveston, Texas, to take control of the last unoccupied Confederate state, which was Texas. Okay, so it took military force to bring Texas back into the Union. And General Order number 3 is enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation did not legally free the enslaved Africans. The Emancipation Proclamation did not legally free the enslaved Africans, okay? It's going to be the 13th Amendment, which was ratified December 6, 1865. We're going to get to that in just a minute. We'll come to that in just a minute because this is more misinformation that's floating around. Now, the following day, June 19th, Major General Gordon Granger read the contents of General Order number 3 from the balcony of Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas. And I've actually seen a picture of Ashton Villa, is still standing there. Okay, his proclamation announced in part. Okay, so it's important to read these documents. I spoke for Hood Research here in Detroit yesterday. On Saturday, Friday, I spoke out in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and I actually read what General Order Number 3 says. Most of what we know about General Order Number 3 and Juneteenth stops with the first sentence. It says, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States," that would be Abraham Lincoln, but Lincoln's assassinated at this point. He's assassinated. He's shot April 4th, 1865 at the Ford Theater. And then he dies the next morning, April 15th, 7:22 a.m. He's shot by John Wilkes Booth. Okay. But Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. He issues that January 1st, 1863. Okay. With a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Now, one of the myths is that the way this story is told, they stop right there. All slaves are free. They don't read the rest of what General Order Number 3 says. Okay. General Order Number 3 goes on to say, and I want to zoom in on this because I don't want people to miss this. Okay. It goes on to say, this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property rights between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. So they're announcing that the slaves are free in Texas, but they're going to tell them to stay on the plantations and to seek wages from your former slave masters. Okay. Now, I don't want people to misunderstand. I'm not saying we should not celebrate and commemorate Juneteenth. I'm saying when we have these celebrations, we have to deal with the real history surrounding Juneteenth. We have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. And we have to have information and teachings that are incorporated into our celebrations that deal with history, economics, law, and politics. Remember the acronym HELP: history, economics, law, and politics. All that has to be incorporated into our Juneteenth celebrations. At the same time, Juneteenth takes place in the month of June. June is Black Music Month and has been Black Music Month going back to 1978-79. So when you study the origins of these festivals, and in 1866, the year after 1865, 1866, you're going to have Jubilee Day that is first celebrated in Texas, and Jubilee Day is going to become Juneteenth. And they had music, they had celebrations. I totally understand being on a plantation in Texas and you not knowing when freedom is going to come. So I totally understand there were celebrations that broke out when those Africans got the news. There were celebrations subsequent years to commemorate those Africans getting the news. I totally understand that, because many of you all have a celebration celebrating freedom from Friday evening to Sunday night, and you go to happy hour on Friday because you don't have to go to work the next day. So I totally understand them having celebrations. I'm not blaming them. Okay. But it's important for us to really understand this history of what happened, and then the history that happens after 1865, when we go into the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, where you have advances that African Americans are making, and then we have a reversal of those advances with the Compromise of 1877 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden. And Rutherford B. Hayes, the candidate for president, the Republican candidate for president, agrees to remove the Union troops out of the South who were to a certain extent enforcing the new rights that African Americans had. And this allowed the white supremacists, this allowed those Democrats, those of the Southern Democratic Party, the Southern Democrats, this allowed them to take back full control of the state legislatures, of the state government, of the local government, and continue the domestic terrorism against African Americans. And then we go into the Jim Crow era, okay? And then we go into the Great Migration, 1915, 1970. So we have to understand this chronology of history that brings us to where we are today. And in these celebrations that we have of Juneteenth, we have to deal with the voter suppression and the rewriting of state constitutions that took place after Reconstruction ended largely, starting with the Mississippi State Constitution, State Convention of 1890, when they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests to suppress the African American vote. And this became known as the Mississippi Plan, which became the model that other former Confederate states used to rewrite their state constitutions, to impose poll taxes, literacy tests, property ownership requirements to be able to vote, grandfather clauses, things of this nature, okay? So all this history has to be infused, this teaching has to be infused into our Juneteenth celebrations to make this celebration a powerful tool for liberation. It can't just be a Black version of the 4th of July. And some people say, well, this is our Independence Day. No, it wasn't, because those African Americans were not independent once they were released from slavery, because they're largely released without any land, without tools, without compensation, no education, things like this. So even though some of us are going to be able to make a way out of no way, there still wasn't, we weren't independent, okay? We may have been freed, but we were not independent, generally speaking. Now we're going to create townships. We're going to create Black townships, things like this. But no, the 3.9 million former slaves were not independent. Okay. All right. And we know that many of them are going to be locked into a sharecropping system. Okay. To find because the South is trying to find a way they're trying to figure out where's the labor force going to come from, because the Union just freed, the enslaved Africans. Okay, so where's the labor force going to come from? So the sharecropping system is going to re-enslave many of those Africans after the 13th Amendment is ratified December 6, 1865, which legally ends chattel slavery. All right, so let's continue here. All right, so special General Order number 3 says that Major General Gordon Granger delivers June 19th, 1865. It says the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Okay, once again, in a lot of the news stories, MSNBC, CNN, things like this, a lot of this, they're going to stop right there. No, read the rest of it. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property rights between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. Employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. So they did not want these Africans to leave the plantation. They didn't want them roaming around the South, coming up north. They wanted them to stay on those plantations and work for wages. Okay, work for salary. It goes on to say, General Order number 3 goes on to say, they are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So don't go to the military posts of the Union troops. Stay on the plantations. Continue to work for your former slave master for wages. Okay. Now, word of emancipation gradually spread over the vast state of Texas, despite the efforts of some slaveholders to maintain slavery. African Americans, however, would not be denied the liberty that had eluded them so long. When the news came, entire plantations were deserted. So some are still going to leave the plantation anyway. Some are still going to leave. Many African Americans brought from Arkansas, Louisiana, and Missouri during the Civil War returned home, while Texas freedmen, former slaves, headed for Galveston, Texas, Austin, Texas, Houston, and other cities where federal troops were stationed. Okay. Okay. Now, read the rest of this article here. Juneteenth, the growth of an African American holiday. Okay. This is at blackpast.org, blackpast.org. Okay. Now, we're going to dig deeper because I want to correct some misinformation. We're going to look at some myths dealing with Juneteenth. It's important for us to correct this misinformation when we come together and have these celebrations. Okay. And it's all right to it's all right to commemorate what's take place and celebrate freedom. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved Africans. Okay. And the reason why it did not free them is, so if we look at this article here from history.com, official website of the History Channel, and I teach a lot of this history in my online classes. Okay, we have an online class that's starting up today, and I'm going to start teaching this as soon as we finish here with this broadcast. So we're going to start it shortly. We started 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. I'm going to post a link here for Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We also have the information at our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, so the class is on sale, $80, regularly $130, and we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. All right, so we just posted the link here, and it's on the homepage of our website. All right, now let's look at this here. Why did not the Emancipation Proclamation legally free the enslaved Africans? Okay. When you read it, and we learned in, elementary school, Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves, things like this, right? If you read this article here from history.com, official website of the History Channel, what is Juneteenth? What is Juneteenth? The Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, had established that all enslaved people in Confederate states in rebellion against the Union, quote, shall be thenceforward and forever free, end quote. Okay. Now, there's a problem here. Okay. The territories in rebellion, the states in rebellion separated from the Union. They seceded from the Union, so they were no longer under the authority of the Union. So the Union and Lincoln had no authority to dictate to them to do anything. This article here goes on to say, but in reality, the Emancipation Proclamation did not instantly free any enslaved people. The proclamation only applied to places under Confederate control and not slaveholding border states or rebel areas already under Union control. However, as Northern troops advanced into the Confederate South, many enslaved people fled behind Union lines. So you remember Ahmaud Arbery, okay? Ahmaud Arbery killed in Georgia, right? And the three white men that killed Ahmaud Arbery, they said that they were trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. Now, they concocted that story after they originally did not tell the police that when the police arrived on the scene. They concocted that story later. Okay. They said they were trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. All right. Now, when you study Georgia, okay, and the citizen's arrest law in Georgia, that citizen's arrest law dates back to 1863 during the Civil War, when Georgia was part of the Confederacy. Okay, there's an article that I want to pull up. I talked about this during that period of time when the trial was taking place. There's an article that deals with this. The citizens arrest law was the um, law dating back to 1863 in Georgia that dealt with um, targeting runaway slaves from plantations in Georgia. Okay, that's what that law dealt with. If we look at this article here this is from Reuters.com. So this shows you how we're still dealing with the legacy of the Civil War, still dealing with the legacy of slavery. And you have so many people who want to deny this. People like Senator Tim Scott, a lot of these Republicans don't want to deal with repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, don't want an analysis of the laws and how they maldistribute wealth, power, and resources, etc. Okay, slavery era Georgia law, it in focus in trial over Ahmaud Arbery's killing. This is from Reuters.com, Reuters, October 27, 2021. And in the article, it says that before Ahmaud Arbery's killing, the law had largely been unchanged since it was codified in 1863. Since it was codified in 1863, let's zoom in on this here. Okay. Before Ahmaud Arbery's killing, the law had been largely unchanged since it was codified in 1863 when Georgia was part of the slave-holding Southern Confederacy during the U.S. Civil War. Okay, most of the United States had codified some sort of law allowing citizens arrest. The American Civil Liberties Union and others that successfully sought to repeal the law said the state's statute was originally passed, the state of Georgia, the state statute was originally passed to enable the capture of escaped slaves. So this law, dating back to when Georgia was part of the Confederacy in 1863, it was targeting runaway slaves who were running away from the plantations in Georgia, running behind the Union lines during the U.S. Civil War. This is what this law was targeting. Okay. And that law, a version of that law, still remained in place when Ahmaud Arbery was killed. Now, after his death, the law was repealed. Georgia State Legislature and Governor Brian Kemp repealed the law after Ahmaud Arbery is killed. But this still, so you have all these people say, "Oh, that was a long time ago. That has nothing to do with today." That's a lie. That's why we have to utilize this history, utilize this celebration of Juneteenth to force into the national conversation a history that many state legislatures, especially in these former Confederate states, are passing laws to suppress the teaching of that history in their schools. See, Americans are very, very ignorant of history. So when we try to seek a legal remedy for a historical problem, that implies we must understand both law and history. And a lot of people who we have to go through to get these laws passed are ignorant of both. Okay, let's continue here. All right, now. All right, so let me close out this article here. That's from Reuters.com. You can check that out. All right, now let's go back to this one. Okay, so I want to go to, so we look at the one from blackpast.org, okay, just to get some general information on Juneteenth. Now, let's go back and look at this one from history.com, okay. The Emancipation Proclamation only applied to places under Confederate control and not slave-holding border states like Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. They were allowed to keep their slaves. And it did not apply to rebel areas already under Union control. However, as Northern troops advanced into the Confederate South, many enslaved African people fled behind Union lines. All right. Okay, so now, Major General Gordon Granger goes in with about 250,000. When he goes in, about 250,000 enslaved Africans in Texas. He's going to spend about a year going all throughout Texas enforcing General Order Number 3, okay? Because they have to take back Texas by military force. They have to take back Texas by military force. After the war came to a close, now for all practical purposes, the Civil War comes to an end April 9th, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse, okay, but in Virginia. But the Civil War is going to go on to a lesser extent. Is going to go on to a lesser extent for about another 18 months or so, okay, or 16 months, another 16 months, because General Robert E. Lee's army in Virginia, his Confederate army, was the largest Confederate army, but it was not the only Confederate army, okay, in the Civil War. How do we know? Let's look at this article here. See, I teach this in my online classes. So if you haven't registered for my online history class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You want to register for that right now, because we're going to start class number 1 as soon as I finish this broadcast here. Okay, we do class number 1 today, June 18th, 2023. This is a 12-week online course that I teach, and we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We just posted a link here, and it's on the homepage of our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. All right, let's look at this article here. Why the Civil War actually ended 16 months after General Robert E. Lee surrendered. Okay, for one thing, there was a little confusion in Texas. Okay, this is from history.com, official website of the History Channel. So it talks about Lee surrendering to Ulysses S. Grant Appomattox Courthouse, marking the beginning of the end of the grinding 4-year-long U.S. Civil War, which is 1861 to 1865. But it would be more than 16 months before President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, who was Lincoln's vice president, succeeds Lincoln after Lincoln is assassinated, before Andrew Johnson would declare a formal end to the conflict in August of 1866. Okay. Now, the reason why, now this picture right here, this is a picture of General William Tecumseh Sherman meeting with General Joseph E. Johnston to discuss terms of surrender of Confederate forces in North Carolina. Okay. Because Joseph E. Johnston was another Confederate general. All right. So when Lincoln surrenders, that's just his army. All right. General Robert E. Lee's was just one Confederate army to fall. For one thing, Lee had surrendered only his army of Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant. A number of other Confederate forces still remained active, starting with General Joseph E. Johnston's Army of Tennessee, which was the second largest Confederate army after General Robert E. Lee's. But then you also had General Nathan Bedford Forrest of Tennessee, and Nathan Bedford Forrest, his army. Okay, now in 1867, Nathan Bedford Forrest becomes the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, and he's a hero to some people in Tennessee, even to this day. All right, so the Civil War is going to go on for another 16 months or so, up until August of 1866. All right, now keep that in mind. All right, now let's continue. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, okay? Because we definitely need your support. $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. This helps us keep doing the work, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, finance the research, buy new equipment. I just had to buy this laptop here in March, early March. This was $700. I had to invest in a new laptop to be able to broadcast and edit video and do the type of work that we do here at the African History Network. Okay. And we also have our links to Cash App, PayPal on our homepage of our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. All right, let's continue here. Okay, so we've already dispelled some myths. And when we look at this here, let's go to, okay, let's close this article out. I have a bunch of tabs open here in Google Chrome. Let's go back to the first article, What is Juneteenth, here from history.com. Okay. All right. Now, after the war came to a close in the spring of 1865, Major General Gordon Granger's arrival in Galveston that June signaled freedom for Texas's 250,000 enslaved African people. Although emancipation did not happen overnight for everyone, in some cases, enslavers withheld the information until after harvest. Celebrations broke out among newly freed Black people, and Juneteenth was born. Okay. Now, some enslaved Africans are going to get the news that they're free, but their slave masters are not going to let them go. They're going to be held by force. Okay. So Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. June 19th, 1865 was not the last day of slavery. Some of these Africans are going to be held in captivity until the next year, 1866. And the Emancipation Proclamation does not legally end chattel slavery. What legally ends chattel slavery is when the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is ratified December 6, 1865. When the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is ratified December 6, 1865. That's legally going to end chattel slavery. Okay. All right. Now, the year following 1865, freedmen, these former slaves, freedmen in Texas, organized the first of what became the annual celebration of Jubilee Day on June 19th. Now, June 19th was not the date that all 250,000 or most of the 250,000 enslaved Africans got the word that they were free. Once again, Major General Gordon Granger and his troops are going to go throughout the state of Texas for almost a year, delivering General Order Number 3, enforcing it, and taking back control of the state of Texas by military force. June 19th was the date that was agreed upon to celebrate those enslaved Africans getting the word of General Order Number 3 and it being delivered. But that was not the only day that it was delivered. That was not the day that all of them got the news. Okay, that's the date that was the date agreed upon to celebrate them getting the news and General Order Number 3 being delivered. All right, now in the ensuing decades, Juneteenth commemorations featured music, barbecue, prayer services, and other activities, and as African Americans migrated from Texas to other parts of the country, the Juneteenth tradition spread. In 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. Several others followed suit over the years. In June 2021, Congress passed a resolution establishing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. President Joe Biden signed it into law on June 17, 2021. Now, we know that African Americans like Opal Lee, African American woman Opal Lee, a former teacher, she fought for decades to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Okay, so we don't want to leave out the African Americans who fought for this, and also Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas sponsored this bill in the House of Representatives. Okay, so somehow the African Americans that fought for this get left out of the conversation, and some people just want to say, oh, President Joe Biden just signed it into law. No, this was a long hard fight, and I saw some misinformation floating around. President Joe Biden gave this to us, or he chose this holiday for us. No, he didn't. That was a fight that's been taking place for years. And go back to 2020. They tried to get the bill passed in 2020 after George Floyd was killed, because in June 2020, when Juneteenth was celebrated, there were a lot more people celebrating it, because that was the month after George Floyd was killed, May 25th, 2020. And they tried to get the bill passed then to become a federal holiday, but it was blocked in the Senate by Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who cited the cost of another federal holiday, because that's a paid day off for federal workers, so you have to pay them. He said he wasn't racist. He just cited how much it would cost to have another federal holiday, a paid federal holiday, a paid day off. Now, in 2021, he didn't object to the bill. If I remember correctly, he turned around and voted for the bill, the same bill that he blocked in 2020. Okay, but oftentimes we give white people too much credit for efforts that we organize to force to bring into existence. Okay, all right, now I want to look at a few more myths here, and then I got to get out of here and teach this class also. All right, now let's look at this article here. I was reading this article from historian Peniel Joseph. This is called "The Story We've Been Told About Juneteenth Is Wrong." The story we've been told about Juneteenth is wrong. All right, and this is from Texas Monthly, TexasMonthly.com. Yes, TexasMonthly.com. This one right here. It's a really, really good article, and I've been studying the history of Juneteenth for years. I have lectures on it, so if you go to my website, I have a 2.5-hour lecture that you can order, and we also have it in a digital download format, TheAHNShow.com. Okay, that deals with Juneteenth history, Emancipation Proclamation. We deal with a lot of history there. Okay, the story we've been told about Juneteenth is wrong. And let me zoom in on this here. And I want to pick this up on page 3, looking at the stories of how General Order Number 3 was relayed to Galveston's Africans in Galveston Valley. Let me see. Let me scroll down just a second here. Let's go to this here. Okay, George Floyd's public execution by former Minneapolis, Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin, May 25th, 2020, sparked months of demonstrations that swelled into one of the largest social justice movements in American history and elicited an unprecedented collective outpouring of racial grief. Against this backdrop, I was one of many who began to examine Juneteenth anew. I published a CNN opinion article headline, "Make Juneteenth a National Holiday Now," arguing in part that Juneteenth offers Americans a new origin history. Black people are largely absent from our national narratives. Juneteenth, I suggested, offered the opportunity to correct that. But we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Okay. Now, yet the real history of Juneteenth remains largely unknown. The myriad ways in which Black freedom was persistently sabotaged, beginning with Major General Gordon Granger's original order and continuing through today, at a moment when our national narrative is hotly contested. The teaching of history is under attack. The teaching of history is under attack, which lends more urgency to an earnest reckoning with the meaning of Juneteenth, what we are celebrating when we observe it, and should we be celebrating it at all? Is it actually an indictment of America, a repudiation of the 4th of July, or as Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango called it, the 4th of July? He wrote the book, African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide, Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango. Is it a day worthy of veneration, of shame, or of both? Okay, so then he goes in and says, when Major General Gordon Granger first sailed into Galveston, Texas in June 1865, he was accompanied by roughly 2,000 troops, 2,000 Union troops. At the time, Galveston was the most populous city in Texas, with a bustling and lucrative port managed partly by Black workers who transported goods and gossip from around the world, from around the world. Now, Gordon Granger and his staff commandeered a villa in town and set out on the impossible mission of bringing a semblance of order and security to the largest secession state of the newly restored Union. The mood was dark, with cities and rural hamlets still reeling from the physical and economic devastation wrought by the war, because the South is largely devastated by the Civil War. Okay, so about a month earlier, the Confederate Army had won a battle at Palmito, Palmito, Palmito Ranch outside of Brownsville. That clash, the last major action of the Civil War, had been waged more than a month after General Robert E. Lee's surrender in Virginia. So once again, the Civil War did not come to an end April 9th, 1865. Okay, it's still going to go on to a lesser extent, and it's going to go on till August of 1866. Without the forceful appearance of Union soldiers, Black Texans had remained imprisoned within the conclusive clutches of a dying Confederacy. Without the forceful appearance of Union soldiers, African American Texans had remained imprisoned within the convulsive clutches of a dying Confederacy. Okay, the stories of how General Order Number 3 was relayed to Galvestonians vary, but Major General Gordon Granger likely read the order aloud in a public meeting designed to spread the message to as many people as possible. The words, quote, "all slaves are free," end quote, served as a declaration of independence for some and a provocation to others. Granger and his Union troops often encountered a violent, anxious, fearful, and vengeful white population, including Confederate soldiers and sympathizers who engaged in reckless attacks and looting in parts of Texas. So when we have these celebrations of Juneteenth, we need to deal with the real history. And we need to talk about the white domestic terrorism that was taking place in Texas even after General Order Number 3 was delivered, which is why you needed military force to enforce General Order Number 3 and to bring Texas back into the Union. Okay, Juneteenth can't be about watermelon and hot dogs and red pop and all this. We got to deal with we have real work to do when we have these Juneteenth celebrations. Major General Gordon Granger and his Union troops often encountered a violent, anxious, fearful, and vengeful white population, including Confederate soldiers and sympathizers who engaged in reckless attacks and looting in parts of Texas. General Gordon Granger's order was based loosely on President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which made slavery unconstitutional, was not ratified until December 6, 1865, as we already talked about. Now, the order, General Order Number 3, first declared that the formerly enslaved people were free based on, quote, absolute equality and personal rights and rights of property, end quote, between Black people and those who have presumed legal ownership of them. This is the happy news upon which most Juneteenth celebrations are based. This is the happy news upon which most Juneteenth celebrations are based. It's also an oversimplified tale of what happened that day, okay, and subsequent days. because everybody, they didn't go all throughout Texas in one day. They were on horseback, not Escalades. They didn't go all throughout Texas in one day. A common view about Juneteenth in both Black and white communities is that Black folks in Galveston and around Texas were slow to hear or fully grasp the news about the Civil War's end and the arrival of liberty. This is the story, historian Peniel Joseph, who wrote this article, he's saying this is the story that he was told in church, but that's not entirely true. Some portion of Black Texans, some portion of African Americans in Texas, especially those working in the port of Galveston, Texas, knew that the tide of the Civil War had long ago turned in favor of Union troops. They had also probably caught wind of the Emancipation Proclamation from travelers disembarking on the wharves. Further, they likely heard what must have seemed to be fantastical tales about regiments of Black soldiers in the Union Army. News of the impending freedom had almost certainly reached other parts of Texas when enslaved African Americans from the Deep South were transported to the Lone Star State during the war, because Texas was a safe haven for slave owners. So you had slave owners coming from surrounding states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, taking their slaves into Texas, okay, getting away from the Union troops in those surrounding states, all right? And they're going to be taken by force. So Texas was a safe haven for white slave owners fleeing Louisiana and other areas of the Confederacy being conquered by Union troops. But the news held little practical meaning so long as the state remained under Confederate control. The arrival of some 2,000 federal troops appeared to mark an end to white rule over Black Texans. But General Gordon Granger's order limited and undermined the very freedoms that it promised. The relationship between former masters and enslaved people would now evolve into a vague contract between employers and hired labor. Quote, the freedmen are, so this is directly from General Order number 3. Quote, the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages, end quote, read the order. But how could Black Texans enjoy freedom while remaining on plantations? How could Black Texans enjoy freedom while remaining on plantations? Would they be allowed to leave, travel, or reunite with loved ones? Were they forbidden from becoming entrepreneurs and landholders? Furthermore, now, as we already said, some of them are going to leave anyway. Some of them are going to leave the plantations anyway. And there are going to be celebrations that broke out. And I totally understand the celebrations. I'm not mad at them for having celebrations, because even though 100% of freedom didn't come, if you think you may die a slave, and now you see a light at the end of the tunnel, okay, you're going to have a celebration. I totally understand that. Furthermore, Black men and women were warned not to flock to military posts. Since 1863, when Black men were allowed to enlist in the Union Army, its military posts have become beacons for freedmen. The sight of blue uniforms liberating secessionist territories often meant the promise of food, clothing, and reading materials. General Gordon Granger's warning that Black Texans will not be supported in idleness on military posts or elsewhere was an admonishment, a warning suggesting that they could not rely on federal troops, whether those Texans were seeking protection, searching for news about family and friends, looking for work, or in need of food. The troops were there to enforce liberation, but they would not necessarily support those trying to carve out a new life. All right, now this is why even after General Granger arrived, many Black folks responded to the news of freedom cautiously. Many Black folks responded to the news of freedom cautiously, fearing reprisals, fearing backlash from white people in Texas. Yet, as word spread, some did walk away from plantations. Others rejoiced, exulted, and stayed put while planning their next moves. Fears among Black Texans were often borne out. Fears among Black Texans often came true. In the ensuing months, the beginning of the period that would come to be known as Reconstruction, racial violence spread. In one town, white Texans whipped dozens of formerly enslaved African people who celebrated the news of emancipation too enthusiastically. See, now this type of history needs to be incorporated into Juneteenth celebrations. It can't just be we're celebrating Freedom Day. Everybody didn't get freedom. And then you have to also talk about the white domestic terrorism that came about while we were celebrating a little bit of freedom that we did get. And you got to deal with that history that happens from 1865 to 1877. We have to deal with a continuum of history, not one date out of history. We have to deal with a continuum of this history that leads us up to where we are today. Juneteenth can't be a party. We can have a celebration while we incorporate history, economics, law, and politics into that celebration. Okay? How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. How you all like this type of information? Okay? If you're just joining us, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it's Monday, June 18th, 2023. And as soon as I finish this, I'm going to teach class number 1 of my online history class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We're going to start with, we'll do an overview of class number 1. I'll give you some information about that here as well. And I'm doing my radio show tonight, the African History Network show. We do that Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's continue. All right, let's continue here. All right, now, white attacks against free Black people ranged from verbal harassment and intimidation to physical assaults, even murder. Okay, this is after they get the news in 1865, right? Black Texans in Galveston and other parts of the state navigated a new landscape, at times more dangerous and volatile than the one that they had left behind, than the one they left behind, slavery. Because during slavery, they had some type of value to the slave owner. So even though many slave owners were abusive, there's still, you weren't subject to domestic terrorism from other white people attacking you because they knew you were owned by somebody. Whereas after slavery ends, you open to generally speaking, you're open to domestic terrorist attacks from anybody because you weren't owned by somebody now. So you have you have the ending of one chapter and trying to navigate having these new freedoms, but then also dealing with the bushwhackers who were Confederates who would raid camps and attack African Americans, kill them. You're going to have the creation of the Ku Klux Klan, December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. About a week or so after the 13th Amendment is adopted, December 18th, 1865. And you're going to have these other domestic terrorist organizations that come about to keep African Americans in a subservient, servile position. Now, the backlash of many white residents against the ideal of Black citizenship and dignity will become a normal feature of Texas's political landscape, a legacy that persists today. A legacy that persists today. Just as limitations, and all we got to do is look at two African American members of the state legislature in Texas, Justice Pearson and Justin, I think it's Justin Johnson. We saw them being expelled for standing up and wanted to deal with common sense gun laws in Texas and see those white supremacists in the Texas state legislature vote them out. And the white female Texas lawmaker, she was saved by one vote. She almost got voted out also. Just as limitations on Black freedom were baked into Gordon Granger's emancipation announcement, racial discrimination became embedded in public policies that propagated unequal housing and employment opportunities, wealth gaps, educational and residential segregation, police brutality, and political disenfranchisement. Black codes in Texas and throughout the South prevented African Americans from voting, securing fair labor contracts, attending racially integrated public schools, or owning land. For many years, General Granger's arrival in Galveston, Texas, freedom could not be publicly enjoyed in some parts of Texas, even on Juneteenth itself. Okay, so read the rest of this. Is an extensive article by historian Peniel Joseph. It's from TexasMonthly.com. It's called "The Story We've Been Told About Juneteenth Is Wrong." The story we've been told about Juneteenth is wrong. All right, now, if we look here at let's see here. Okay, so that deals with dispelling some of the myths dealing with Juneteenth. There's also another article that you can check out. This is from a couple of years ago. This is from the Washington Post. This is called 5 Myths About Juneteenth. No, it's not the only celebration of emancipation. 5 myths about Juneteenth, okay? Because they mention in here, there's a celebration of emancipation older than Juneteenth by a couple of years. And that is in Gallipolis, Ohio. A town in Gallipolis, Ohio, had the real oldest celebration of the end of slavery. That celebration began September 22nd, 1863, a year after Abraham Lincoln signed the preliminary draft of the Emancipation Proclamation that he issued September 22nd, 1862. Okay, but it's the first national holiday dealing with slavery at all. Okay, so check that out at WashingtonPost.com. All right. If you like this type of information, guys, register. Please register for the 12-week online course that I teach. We're about to teach class number 1 of it right now at our online school. So the class is on sale, $80, regularly $130. So let's just keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc. It's a 12-week online course that I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And let me see here. Got this here. I'm going to post the link here once again. You can use this information with your children. I would say the content is PG-13. We do a PowerPoint presentation, our book references, articles, video clips. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, so you can go back and watch it anytime. The normal day of this class is going to be on Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the normal date and time. When we have these holidays like this, you know, and holiday weekends, everything gets thrown off. Let's see here. And let's see if we can show this here. How'd you all like this type of information? Did you learn anything today? Be sure to listen to the African History Network show on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF, and our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Okay, so when you go to our website and you scroll down the screen, you'll see the information about our radio show. Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. PayPal, Cash App information. This is our official Cash App account, $ TheAHNShow, $TheAHNShow. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. It may show my picture there. Click right here for Cash App. Takes you to our Cash App QR code also. Now, these other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. Our tag is $TheAHNShow, SHOW. So if you type it in manually, type in the full Cash App tag, because some of these other fake ones will come up first, and they've been stealing money from us. It's like 5 fake ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. I've opened up a fraud report with Cash App last year. I'm still trying to get them shut down. But here's information here about our online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade. Kemet's one of the original names for Egypt. The Ma'afa is a Kiswahili term which refers to the transatlantic slave trade, which is our great disaster. So click right here, register for full 12-week course. It's on sale, $80, regularly $130. You also get free 5 free lectures of mine that are in the video library. Okay, so this is our summer class. Scroll down, just click right here on the purple button. It says enroll here. It says enroll, and you can do debit card, credit card, PayPal. If you want to do Cash App, email us at AHNShow. AHNShow at TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, or email us right through the website to pay through Cash App. Okay. All right. So you're going to learn so much in this class. We cover about 80 to 100 articles. There's 7 books that we use as our main books as reference. You don't have to buy any of these books. We show them. I show you an excerpt of them on the screen. I do a PowerPoint presentation as well. I put together the whole curriculum for this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. I've been studying history 31 years. You see my videos. You see me on the African History Network show. You see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered and Faraji Muhammad show, The Culture. So register for this class, and we'll see you in class in a few minutes. Remember, right now is corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. All right. Hopefully you all learned a lot from this broadcast. We'll deal with some of this information on our show Sunday night also, the African History Network show. And let me post this right here. Okay.